There's no way that we could say that one single chapter of the Bible is the most important. There are so many chapters that are so precious, instructive, uplifting to us. One of the ones that we might put on the top upper echelon would be Hebrews 11. We've often called it the Hall of Faith chapter. I have my Bible open to it now, and I'm not going to read from it, but merely make reference. Chapter 11, verse 4, Abel. Chapter 5, verse 5, Enoch. Verse 7, Noah. Verse 8, Abraham. And it keeps on going. By faith, these people heard God's instruction and obeyed. And without talking about those that we have studied time and again, it has been for a long many years so intriguing to me how the inspired writer in verses 32 and following said this, "Oh, and what shall I say more? For the time would fail me to tell about Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, of David and Samuel and of the prophets." In those two verses, in just the last few days, we've already talked about Gideon. We've mentioned Barak. We certainly have talked about Samson last week. Jephthah's one of the judges. David and Samuel, the last two that are mentioned here. And it's almost as the inspired writer was saying, I've mentioned these and these and these, but there are so many more. David is mentioned in this list. And I'm pausing to give a little bit of accentuation to what we know about David, a man after God's own heart. I mean, what a tremendous epitaph or statement. How wonderful it would be if it could be said of us that we were a person after God's own heart. We're going to study about David tonight. We're not going to spend time, except just allusion to it right now, alluding to the fact of the major known blunder in his life. At nighttime, on his rooftop, he walked out, looked down, and saw Bathsheba bathing. That became the ripple effect of a tragedy. He sent for her. They were sexually together. A child was conceived. But then they tried to cover it up by various means, all of which failed. God took the child. Adultery, yes. Lying, most certainly. Murder, David gave the orders for Uriah to take a message back to the battle that was engaged in at that time, put him out on the front lines and let everybody else pull back, and he died. It was as if David thrust a sword through him. He killed Uriah. But here in verse 32 of Hebrews 11, I wish I could tell you more even about David. The Hall of Faith. And I've got to, in order to make this extremely viable, back up in this same chapter when he's listing all of these. In verse 13, he said, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were persuaded of them, embraced them, confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they say such things, declare plainly that they seek a country. There are so many ways that we can learn great lessons from God's Word. And here's a little bit of a most unique way. Here we are, centuries later, looking back at Barak and Jephthah and Gideon and David, knowing what the record says about David. And yet, these all died in faith. It certainly must be encouraging and uplifting to us not to rejoice about David's blunder and sin and cover up and murder and all of that, but to accentuate especially sin can be taken care of. We can still be a person of faith. Having blundered, having sinned, the way man sees it, pretty grossly. I start tonight by looking at, in particular, David through these particular eyes as we continue our greatest story ever. And in particular, we're in 1 Samuel, where we find David becoming king, first becoming popular, first, and again in the earlier portions, a rival to King Saul. People thought highly of King Saul until David came along, and then they had a song, something that went, Saul has killed his thousands, David has killed his 10,000s, and Saul was jealous. David had an enemy. Let's lay a foundation. First of all, the first book of Samuel. And the reason I said that way, as I mentioned even Sunday, originally some of the manuscripts were 1st and 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Kings were one book. Now it's divided, no harm. But there's 36 chapters in this first book. In the very beginning of 1 Samuel, we find about Samuel, his birth and his boyhood. Chapter 4 and continuing through chapter 7, war, which was frequent at that time. We've heard a lot about the Philistines. We're going to hear more even after this portion of Scripture. But in this very brief outline, the highlights is Samuel and wartime, and then the reign of King Saul. It was not, listen carefully, you already know this, having a king to reign over them was not God's plan. Wasn't God's desire. The people, and we could pause and take more time and read over and over what the people said, how they cried out, "Give us a king. Let us have a king. Let us be like the nations round about us," none of which were valid, a right or righteous thing. But God tolerated it. God allowed it. And Saul became the first king. We find that in chapters 8 through 15. And then again, the Philistines, chapters 13 and 14, we're approaching a pivotal, amazing story. As we look this past week at the destruction of the Amalekites, and how Saul claimed to have done what God said do. I performed it, but he hadn't. And as a result, Saul declined in popularity and was rejected by God. Do you notice in just merely the first 15 chapters, quickly overviewed, how much has taken place? We could spend weeks on just Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles. There's so much to flesh out. Even today, I found some things, that little gems of thought or truths that I had either not calculated before, didn't know before, that I hope to share tonight. David was anointed. He ended up becoming king, replacing Saul. In chapters 16 and 17, we find him killing Goliath. I'm not going to ask because I think I know the answer, but I will kind of challenge you in your mind, kind of go back and see if you can recall what approximate age you were when you heard the story of David and Goliath for the first time. I can remember it myself because it was one of those stories that my mother taught us 5 children. The book that is known today as Bible Stories from the Rocking Chair. That's how we learned a lot of those stories. My mother, she was human, made mistakes, but she was a great mother. And she taught us children the things of the Bible that would help us, and even to this day, I remember. Since that time, I cannot, and I dare say you cannot either, begin to count the times that you've heard it referred to in a sermon, in a Bible class, or just a textual study. It can be an amazing actual event in the long ago that can come alive for us today and serve in wonderful ways to uplift and strengthen God's people today. Monday, I believe it was, I was doing some searching through the resources. One of the sermons that I came across was overcoming our giants as David overcame Goliath, the giant. Our giants may not be almost 10 feet tall. By the way, a cubit is from the tip of the elbow to the tip of the fingers of the one in reign at that time. Historians say that's usually considered 18 inches. All right? 9 cubits, or 6 cubits rather, 9 feet. But historians also tell us it could be as much as 22 inches. If you were to take 22, that means he's not 9 feet, but 11 feet tall. How tall is that paneling? How tall is the ceiling? Recently, I was doing some reading at an Apologetics Press material, and they were talking about giant-sized animals that likely lived according to the remnants and archives and archaeological discoveries. And that does not violate anything that is found in the Bible. We can remember a people known as the giants in that day. So he was not a freak. He was just huge. I read from one source that said someone around 10 feet tall or more, and no doubt extremely muscular. The Bible says in 1 Samuel that he was a man of war from youth, that he likely weighed between 600 and 700 pounds. Just imagine. One of the writers I read, I don't know, I think last week, I believe it was, said, can you imagine him in the wrestling federation or whatever you want to call it? What kind of a winner he would be, going against everybody else, little bitty midgets almost in his size. But I mention all of this to be able to really draw attention to David, very likely still a teenager, maybe as old as 20, one author said. Seeing him, heard his challenges, and said, I'll fight him. The insult, it no doubt was to Goliath. And yet David was the only one of God's people, that army, that was ready to stand up and fight him. The rest of them fled, ran, scared to death. For 40 days, Goliath came out and insultingly berated God's people. And they didn't do anything about it. I have just given you a brief overview, ever so brief. My initial plan was just let that suffice, draw some lessons from it. But as I had read and reread and read for the third time in the last week, these 58 verses, I changed my mind. May I read with you tonight again and pause throughout it and notice the things that are tremendous, noteworthy thoughts. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shoal, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shoal and Azekah in a Pisdammim. I'm no doubt butchering these. I'm doing the best I knew. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. I read something that I thought was interesting. The Philistine army was fighting the Israeli army for this valley where they were, because it was a strategic corridor between the cities on the coast and the inland cities such as Bethlehem and Hebron. This territory belonged to Israel, but the Philistines were determined to take it from them. The Israelites were camping on the north side of the valley. Philistines were on the south. Only a dry riverbed separated them. It was here in the valley where Goliath would come to stand, challenging and intimidating God's people. Bethlehem, only 15 miles away, where David's father had said, "You've got 3 brothers in the army there. Go check on them. Take them things." 15 miles was a long way back then. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side. Just what I just read. And there was a valley between them. And there was a champion out of the camp of the Philistines. His name was Goliath of Gath. Gath in particular, if you do a search on that, and the various times it's referred to in the scriptures, it was from Gath where the giants were known. And Goliath's height was 6 cubits, and even a little bit more than that. We don't know exactly what a span is. Most people say that it's hand span, but we don't even know that for sure. And I mentioned a moment ago about the cubits, 18 to 22, could be 9 to 11 feet tall, plus a span. Goliath had a helmet of brass upon his head, armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat itself was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs and a target of brass upon his shoulders. And the staff of his spear, can you just imagine how long the spear was? And the staff was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, "Why are you come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Philistine, and your servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you. Let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants, and you'll serve us." The Philistine, Goliath, said, I'm challenging the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we might fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard these words, the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Can you imagine? It might have gone through their mind, we can gang up on him, maybe get him down. But one man? To one man? We might call it, this challenge that is, winner take all. Whoever wins, who takes it all. It's a daunting challenge. Now, David was the son of Ephrathite, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons. The man was among the men with all the old men in the days of Saul. And the 3 older sons of Jesse went, followed Saul to the battle, and the names, in other words, here it was, the setting. Here's Goliath coming out. Now he's kind of taking a backward glance and looking at Jesse and his son David being in Bethlehem. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem, a mere 15 miles away, but rather significant at that time. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening, 40 days in a row. All right, kind of interjected there. Going back now to Jesse and David, his son, verse 17. Jesse said, "Take now for your brothers an ephah of this parched corn and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp of thy brethren. And carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000. And look how and see how your brethren are doing and take their pledge. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with Philistines. That's where David was going to go. David got up the next morning early, left the sheep with a keeper, somebody take care of them while he was gone, and he took and went as his daddy had said. And he came to the trench, that dry valley in between, and the host was going forth to the fight and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, ran into the army, came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, just at that very time that David was going there and saluting them and greeting them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words that had just been said. And David heard them. It's one thing for the army to have heard them, those in charge, those under the ones in charge, and for them all to be afraid. And as Goliath would come out in booming voice, you can just imagine how loud and boisterous and arrogant it sounded. Bring somebody out, fight against me, and whoever wins takes it all, as it were. David heard that. The men of Israel, when they saw the man, they fled. They were not just afraid, they were scared, sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man that has come up? Surely he's to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine? And taketh away the reproach, from Israel. And for who is this uncircumcised Philistine? David is saying, who is he? That he should defy the armies of the living God. There are several statements similar to this one that drew me to the decision of reading it again tonight. That's one of them. David saw it differently. David's eyes were not just merely military power versus military power. David had witnessed the almighty power and providence and authority of God. We're going to come in just a moment when David even tells Saul about why he even thinks he can go against and fight against Goliath is because, let me tell you about a bear and a lion. David had fought against both and won. Not normal. Not what was expected. Neither would it be expected for him to go against a 10-foot tall, muscular, powerhouse champion of a man. But David said he's defying the armies of the living God. The people answered him after this manner, saying, so shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, his eldest brother, you talking about jealousy, pride, arrogance. One of the brothers of David, who is in the army fighting for Saul, heard Saul, and over they heard when he spake unto the men. They heard David say, and Eliab's anger was kindled. He's furious with David, and he said, why did you come thou here? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? A cutting statement. What you're doing, David, is trivial. Those little old few sheep you take care of, who'd you leave them with anyway? He said, I know thy pride. I know the naughtiness of thine heart. For thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. Even his own brother turned on him, attacked him, falsely accused him. And David answered him, what have I now done? Notice what he said. Is there not a cause? I can't tell you how many sermons, but there's been more than I've got digits on my right on a hand that I've heard sermons entitled, Is There Not a Cause? We could talk about that benevolently. Is there not a good reason, a cause why we should take care of those that are less fortunate? We could talk about it. Weary, erring, fallen brethren. Is there not a cause that we should fight for them, go and help them to be restored? Is there not a cause? Evangelistically, is there not a cause? Here at Cedar Grove, we may never see the people at Joss. We may never see those out away from that school that yet have not obeyed the gospel, but hopefully will soon. We may never see them, but there's a cause there. David said, is there not a cause? And he turned from him toward another and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. You can't imagine anything else happening. Saul didn't hear what he said first. But when others heard what David said, you know they went immediately to Saul and said, there's somebody down here and he's saying thus and so. And they told him, they rehearsed with him what David had said. And David then brought before Saul, said, let no man's heart fail because of that giant that defies you. He tells him, I will go and fight with this Philistine. It's pretty admirable, isn't it? It's pretty awesome, isn't it? But a few minutes ago, I mentioned, best that we can tell, he might have still been in his teen years. And the most that I've ever found is in his early 20s. A young shepherd boy. Not a warrior.
Paul, you ever heard the phrase that sometimes courage skips a generation?
Yes. Right there, isn't it? Amazingly. Great point, Newell. And I don't maybe pause long enough in between sentences to give comments, but I welcome, and what any of y'all add is so valuable. It may skip a generation. But here we see a young boy that demonstrates courage in the nth degree because there's a cause. He's not fighting for himself. He's not fighting for his people. He goes ahead in a few moments and talks about whose battle it really is. Read with me. And Saul said to David, well, you're not able to go against this Philistine to fight, for you're but a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth. David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep. I kept them. And there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock And I went after him and smote him and delivered it out. I took that lamb out of the bear and out of the lion's mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him. And I killed this bear and lion. But David knew it wasn't by his muscular power that he did that. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them. I'll take him down too, because I see that he hath defied the armies of the living God. He has intimidated God's soldiers. He has insulted God's people. And there's a cause that I'm going to fight. He says further, David said, moreover, the Lord, listen to this powerful, awesome faith statement. The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. Foolish? Question mark. Arrogant? Question mark. No. Confident. Gavin, please.
I don't think all David knew he had to do was deliver that stone on target. And God can take care of it.
Yes, absolutely.
And no doubt he had practiced.
Actually, it's been a few months ago. I think I even mentioned it here one time way back when. I did some I happened across it, luckily. They were known as slingers. It was a skill, an amazing skill. They could stand many yards away and hit a piece of fruit on a tree. It was truly a fine-tuned skill with a sling with one stone. The stones, by the way, were not little bitty pebbles, very likely. I read something else where, let me see if I can put it. Here it is. A man by the name of Gary Fine preached a sermon back in 2018, and he said today, he had been over there, tourists who visit the Holy Lands often make a point to go to the Valley of Elah, the site of the battle between David and Goliath. They often find pebbles on the ground, and many people collect them to take them home as souvenirs, thinking they have a stone similar to what David used in his sling. He went ahead to say, he dug deeper. I'm not going to read the whole big lengthy thing. But he said what David used to kill Goliath was much larger than just a round stone. The tourists were actually collecting rocks that the Israeli Board of Tourism had transported into this area from the coastland. Frequently, a large truck would bring in the pebbles to the valley for the tourist attraction. But very likely, the pebbles, as he's called, were larger rocks. Now, I realize that you can get velocity, slinging, somebody with skill especially, and even a small rock planted into the forehead could go deep. But you take a little bit larger rock, it would even be more. Yes, but exposed maybe right above that. Yes, Melissa? Yeah. Yes. In other words, I've got a .22 rifle. LaDon and I each have one, and used to in years past, we love to go target shooting. That little lady in the day, she couldn't do it now, and I can't do it either. She's been an amazing marksman. I've seen her take a revolver, a 6-shot revolver, and walk a tin can, hitting it 5 shots out of 6. I can take a .22 and from here to the door, even today, pretty often, pretty accurate. But that's with not a scope, but with a sight. Can you imagine being so accurate with a sling that you could swirl that thing around and around and around and let it go just at precisely the millisecond that would maybe hit that doorknob back there? Called slingers. Yes, Gavin's point is accurate. David was going to do his part. He knew he was capable, knew he could do it. But here is a man 10 feet tall, muscular, 600-700 pounds. The other part was God's part. Let's read further. Saul armed David with his armor and put a helmet of brass on his head, armed him with a coat of maul. David girded his sword with his armor and essayed to go, for he had not proved it. David said unto Saul, I can't go with all this, for I have not proved them. And David put them off. Saul was offering his armor. David's a young boy, a young shepherd boy. They didn't fit him. He said, that's not the way I do it. I'm paraphrasing. So he took his staff in his hand, chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand. He drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came up and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. When the Philistine looked about and saw David, can you imagine? I can just, oh man, look at that little kid. They were disdained. He was but a youth. He was ruddy. He was of fair countenance. He wasn't dark-skinned. He wasn't an outdoor person, maybe as like Goliath was. And the Philistine said unto David, am I a dog? And thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me. I'll give thy flesh unto the fowls. I'll feed you to the beast of the field. And David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield. Listen to the powerful, awesome words of David. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, the one that you have defied. He didn't stick a sword in Goliath's side, but he pierced him deeply with these words. You come to me. No, it's probably a squeaky little voice. You come to me with this and this and this, but I come in the name of Almighty God, to paraphrase it. And this day will the Lord deliver thee into my hand, and I'll smite thee, and I'll take thine head from thee. And I'll give the carcasses of the host of Philistines this day, the fowls of the air and the wild beasts of the earth. I find it interesting that he said, I'm going to get your head. Hadn't happened yet. But David it's like Abraham offering his son Isaac. He offered him. Oh, no, but his son didn't die. But as far as Abraham was concerned, he did. Here, David is already seeing what's going to happen. He's going to behead Goliath. Why is he going to do this? This day the Lord's going to deliver me. Why? That all the earth may know that there's a God in Israel. I know our time's getting away. I feel like I just am compelled to pause and plead with us to have the kind of faith in God walking with, empowering us, strengthening us to do His will, that the earth may know there is a God in heaven. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not by sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he'll give you into our hands. It's not just the Philistines that are going to learn this. It's even those soldiers who've been scared to death, who've cowered in timid fear. Every time Goliath's voice, even morning and evening, come booming across the dry ground of the valley, they were scared. And David is saying that this whole assembly will know that it was the Lord that saved, not with a sword, but with the power of God. So it happened. Came to pass when the Philistine arose, came, drew nigh to meet David, and David hastened. Listen to this. He wasn't scared. He ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, slang it, smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. And David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, smote the Philistine, slew him. There was no sword in his hand. Therefore David ran, stood upon the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out of the sheath thereof, Goliath's sword, and slew him, cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines, the rest of them, saw their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted. You can only imagine the rejoicing, and pursued, ran after the Philistines. And they fell down in the way, even at Gath and unto Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines, and they spoiled that. They took all the valuables, everything that was in their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to, he took Goliath's head to Jerusalem and put his armor in the tent. Saul saw David go forth against the Philistine and said, who is it? Whose son is this youth? I cannot tell. But he says, we'll find out, basically. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him, brought him before Saul, with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son art thou, young man? And David answered, I'm the son of thy servant. Listen, connectivity. I am the son of thy servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. I've got several great lessons. Let me start with just one of them. I want us to make an application to our life, not just David and Goliath. We face giants. May not be 10 foot tall. It may seem minuscule, teeny. It may be emotionally, financially, maritally, spiritually. It may be enemies, betrayers. I don't know if I've hit by describing these giants that you face or not. And I might even add, if you're not facing one right now, just hang on, you'll face one soon, very likely. When we least expect them. But let it be said, we also can say the battle is the Lord's. We also can be delivered like David was from the lion and the bear, and now Goliath. Figuratively, if we'll merely take the hand of our God. 1 Peter 5:7, cast all of our care upon him. He cares for you. You'll not face more than you're able to bear. I'll make a way of escape, 1 Corinthians 10. I'll never leave you, forsake you, Hebrews 13:5 and 6. Those 3 or 4, 5 powerful passages that reassure us that whatever battle we can win. Though God did not say, I'll spare you every time. In fact, in Matthew chapter 10, we're told not to fear those that may kill you. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, we'll suffer persecution. Paul said, I don't know what my future is. I may die. But for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. You see, death is not defeat. To the child of God, death is victory. Well, Don and I sat and flipped through a photo album today of pictures of her parents and my parents together. And we shed tears of happiness and joy, missing them, but knowing that one day we'll be together again. I have no doubt that every single one of you could bring to your mind's eye some similar one and say the same thing. How rich. We can fight giants and win. But a battle along that line is maybe small in comparison to the battle that we face in life time and time again to get to our mansion. The lesson is yours. Number 444. 444. I remember seeing photographs of someone that represented Jesus standing at a door with his hand up and knocking at the door. I thought that they had messed up. The artist had forgot to put a doorknob on that door. No, there was symbolism in that. You have to open the door from the inside to let Jesus into your heart. He intentionally left the doorknob off. If we need Christ, His mercy, His grace, forgiveness, if we need to just be able to talk to God through the intercessor Jesus in your behalf, please just make that desire known. We come together as family. We want to get to heaven together as family. And we say it. It's not just a phrase. It's not just mere words. But we say it and we mean it. If there is any way that we can be of assistance, won't you come as we stand and sing?
There's a stranger at the door. Let him in. He has been there oft before. Let him in. Let him in if he is gone. Let him in, the Holy One, Jesus Christ, the Father